Lucky break, isn't it? Graduating top of her class like that. Vivian Morrow scoffed, her gaze fixed on Zuri Adebio's glowing brown skin at the University of Chicago's law graduation. Can you imagine the weight of those words, the sting of judgment on such a triumphant day? Zuri, a breathtaking black valedictorian with her hair elegantly coiled, endured the Morrow family's scorn, jabs at her race veiled in smug tones. Each insult stung, but Zuri holds a secret that will turn their world upside down. Asterisk, what could it be? Stay with Real Stories Diary to find out. Asterisk, will their bias unravel? Or will Zuri's strength redefine their reality? Stay tuned to find out. If you love tales of triumph, smash that subscribe button for Real Stories Diary and tell us where you're listening from, Tokyo, Chicago, or beyond. Share your predictions. How will Zuri shine? This twist will shock you, so don't miss it. The University of Chicago's quad buzzed with the electric hum of commencement day. Graduates in navy gowns milled about, their laughter mingling with the rustle of spring leaves. Zuri Adebio stood apart, her reflection shimmering in a nearby fountain. Her deep brown skin glowed under the midday sun, and her tightly coiled hair, swept into an elegant high bun, gleamed like a crown. The plum silk dress beneath her gown hugged her frame, a quiet rebellion against the muted tones around her. At 26, Zuri was no ordinary graduate. She was the law school's valedictorian, a scholarship student who'd clawed her way to the top with grit and brilliance. Today, she'd deliver the commencement address, her words poised to echo beyond the ivy-covered walls. Zuri's fingers grazed the note cards in her pocket. Her speech, a tapestry of justice and resilience. She'd spent weeks crafting it, each sentence a tribute to her parents, her mother, a librarian who'd worked double shifts, and her father, a mechanic who taught her to fix what the world broke. Her journey hadn't been easy. Growing up in a modest Evanston neighborhood, she'd faced teachers who doubted her, peers who whispered about quotas, and a society that often saw her skin before her mind. Yet here she was, ready to claim her place. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. A text from Kyle Morrow, her boyfriend of 2 years. Almost there, love. You're going to kill it. A smile tugged at her lips. Kyle, with his easy grin and coder's intensity, had been her anchor. Their love had bloomed over late-night study sessions and jazz club dates, his warmth a counterpoint to her fire. But today wasn't just about her triumph. It was the first time Kyle's family would meet her. The Morrows, a wealthy Chicago dynasty, were a world apart from her own. Kyle had downplayed their influence, but Zuri sensed the weight of their expectations. She scanned the crowd, her heart quickening as she spotted Kyle weaving through the sea of gowns. His dark hair caught the light, and his gray suit fit him like a promise. Behind him trailed 3 figures, their polished elegance unmistakable. Vivian Morrow led the pack, her ash blonde hair swept into a chignon, her cream dress screaming understated wealth. Gerard, broad-shouldered in a navy suit, followed with a measured stride. Camille, Kyle's older sister, strutted in a tailored blazer, her auburn hair cascading in calculated waves. They were a portrait of privilege, and Zuri felt their gaze before they reached her. Zuri, Kyle's voice was warm as he pulled her into a quick embrace, his cedar cologne grounding her. You look incredible. She smiled, her bun gleaming as she tilted her head. Thanks, Kyle. Ready for this circus? He chuckled, but his eyes flicked nervously to his family. Zuri braced herself as Vivian stepped forward, her smile as crisp as her dress. Zuri, how lovely to meet you, she said, her voice smooth but cool. Her handshake was fleeting, her fingers barely grazing Zuri's. That dress is bold. Quite a statement for today. Zuri's jaw tightened, but she kept her tone even. Thank you, Mrs. Morrow. I wanted to honor the occasion. The word bold lingered, a subtle jab at her choice to stand out. She'd faced such coded slights before, remarks that cloaked judgment in courtesy. Gerard offered a curt nod, his eyes scanning her like a ledger. Kyle's told us about you, he said, his tone flat. Law school's tough. You must have worked hard to keep up. The implication stung, keep up, as if her place here was a fluke. Zuri straightened, her bun a silent testament to her poise. I did. Top of the class doesn't come easy, but I earned it. Camille's laugh was sharp, her eyes raking over Zuri's gown. "Oh, I bet. A full scholarship, right? That's fortunate. Not everyone gets those breaks." Her emphasis on fortunate was a blade, suggesting Zuri's success was luck, not merit. Zuri's pulse quickened, but she held Camille's gaze. "Fortune favors the prepared. I made sure I was." Her voice was calm, but a fire simmered beneath. She'd spent years proving herself in rooms like this, where her skin drew scrutiny before her words. Kyle shifted, his hand brushing Zuri's. "Zuri's brilliant," he said, his tone firm but tinged with unease. "She's about to blow everyone away with her speech." Vivian's smile didn't reach her eyes. "How inspiring," she said, the word clipped. "I'm sure it'll be memorable." She turned to Kyle, her hand on his arm. "Darling, we should find our seats. You'll want a good view of the stage." Zuri caught the subtext. Kyle was theirs, and she was an outsider. Gerard and Camille followed Vivian's lead, their farewell nods perfunctory. As they walked away, Camille's voice carried back, "Lucky break, that valedictorian spot. Wonder how she pulled it off." The words landed like a slap. Zuri's fingers curled into her palm, but her face remained serene. She'd heard worse: professors who questioned her citations, classmates who assumed she was the diversity hire. But this was different. These were Kyle's people, the family she'd hoped might embrace her. Their disdain wasn't just for her degree, it was for her very existence in their world. Kyle's hand found hers, his grip tight. "Ignore them," he whispered. "They're just set in their ways. They'll come around." Zuri met his eyes, searching for conviction. She wanted to believe him, but the knot in her chest tightened. "Kyle, they're not just set in their ways. They're judging me. You heard them." He hesitated, his jaw clenching. "I'll talk to them, okay? Today's your day. Focus on your speech." She nodded, but his words felt like a bandage on a wound that needed stitches. As the crowd began to file into the auditorium, Zuri adjusted her gown, her bun a beacon of resolve. She'd fought too hard to let the morrows dim her light. Her speech was her weapon, a chance to show the world and Kyle's family who she was. But as she stepped toward the stage, a question gnawed at her: would Kyle stand by her if his family's subtle venom grew sharper? The answer lay ahead, in the hours that would test not just her strength, but the love they'd built. The fountain's ripple faded behind her, and Zuri lifted her chin. This was her moment, and no one, not even the morrows, could take it from her. But the air felt heavier now, charged with the promise of a storm she couldn't yet see. The auditorium of the University of Chicago pulsed with anticipation, its vaulted ceiling swallowing the murmurs of 1,000 guests. Rows of navy-clad graduates sat upright, their tassels swaying like pendulums. Zuri Adebayo stood backstage, her heart a steady drumbeat against the weight of her gown. Her high bun, a sculpted crown of coiled hair, caught the stage lights, and she adjusted her note cards. The plum dress beneath her robe shimmered, a quiet defiance in a sea of conformity. She was moments from delivering the valedictorian address, her words poised to carve a mark on this day. Zuri's mind flickered to the Morrow family's cutting remarks an hour earlier, Camille's lucky break jab, Vivian's veiled disdain, Gerard's skeptical nod. Their words had stung, but she'd faced worse: law professors who'd dismissed her arguments, classmates who'd whispered about affirmative action. The stage was her battleground, and her speech would be her sword. She glanced at the auditorium, spotting Kyle in the front row, his dark hair a beacon. Beside him, Vivian's cream dress gleamed, her posture rigid. Gerard and Camille flanked her, their faces unreadable. Zuri's chest tightened. She needed Kyle to see her not just as his girlfriend, but as the woman who'd earned this moment. The dean's voice boomed, introducing her: Zuri Adebayo, our valedictorian, whose brilliance and dedication have set a new standard. Applause rippled as Zuri stepped forward, her heels clicking with purpose. The spotlight bathed her in gold, her brown skin radiant, her bun a symbol of unyielding resolve. She scanned the crowd, her gaze lingering on Kyle. His smile was warm, but his eyes darted to his mother, betraying a flicker of unease. Zuri began, her voice clear and resonant: "Today, we stand at the edge of justice, a calling that demands we see beyond ourselves. I learned this from my parents, who built a life from sacrifice, and from a world that often judged me before I spoke. Her words wove stories of late nights in the library, of cases she'd argued for marginalized communities, of a girl who'd turned doubt into fuel. The audience leaned in, captivated by her cadence, her passion a living thing. A professor nodded from the side. A classmate wiped a tear. But in the front row, Vivian's lips pressed into a thin line, her fingers clutching her purse. Camille whispered something to Gerard, who gave a curt nod. Their dismissal was a silent blade, slicing through Zuri's triumph. She pushed on, her voice rising, law isn't just precedent. It's a promise to fight for those who've been silenced. That's the legacy I carry, and it's why we're here. The auditorium erupted, a standing ovation shaking the rafters. Zuri's heart soared. But as she stepped off the stage, her eyes sought Kyle. He clapped fiercely, pride in his gaze, but his family remained seated, their applause perfunctory. Vivian's smile was a mask, and Camille's eyes rolled subtly. The contrast was stark. Hundreds celebrated her, but the Morrows saw only the color of her skin. Zuri descended to the floor, her gown rustling as she approached Kyle. She wanted to share this victory, to feel his arms around her. But as she neared, Vivian stood, her voice cutting through the crowd's din. Kyle, darling, let's get a family photo by the podium. Just us. She gestured to Gerard and Camille, her eyes sliding past Zuri as if she were invisible. Zuri froze, her breath catching. Kyle hesitated, his hand half reaching for her. Mom, Zuri should be in it. This is her day. Vivian's laugh was light, brittle. Oh, of course, but we need one for the family album. Zuri's got plenty of friends to pose with, I'm sure. Camille chimed in, her tone syrupy. Yeah, Zuri, you must want pics with your study group or something. The words were a deliberate exclusion, a reminder that Zuri didn't belong in their frame. Her fingers tightened around her diploma, the leather case grounding her. She just commanded a room of scholars, yet here she was, reduced to an outsider. She looked to Kyle, her eyes pleading for him to act. He shifted, his jaw clenching, but his voice was soft. It's just one photo, Zuri. We'll take more with you after. Her heart sank. His compromise felt like surrender, a crack in the foundation they'd built. Kyle, she said, her voice low but firm, this isn't about a photo. It's about them not seeing me. He opened his mouth to respond, but Vivian was already ushering him away, her hand on his elbow. Gerard and Camille followed, their backs a wall between Zuri and the family she'd hoped to join. The crowd swirled around her, classmates offering congratulations, but Zuri felt alone, the weight of the Morrows' rejection heavier than her gown. A professor approached, her silver hair glinting. Zuri, that speech was extraordinary. You've got a gift. Zuri smiled, thanking her, but Vivian's voice drifted over, loud enough to carry. She's articulate, I'll give her that. But it's a lot of idealism for a lawyer, don't you think? Gerard grunted in agreement, and Camille's laugh was a sharp echo. Zuri's pulse roared. Their words weren't just about her speech, they were about her right to be here, to stand beside Kyle. She'd faced prejudice before, but this was personal, a test of the love she and Kyle had nurtured. As the graduates spilled onto the quad for photos, Zuri lingered, her bun still pristine, her resolve hardening. The Morrows thought they could dismiss her, but they didn't know her strength. Tonight's celebratory dinner loomed, a new battlefield where their slights might sharpen. She needed Kyle to stand with her, not behind her. But his silence now was a warning. As the sun dipped, casting long shadows across the stone arches, Zuri tucked her diploma under her arm. This was her day, and she'd fight for it, speech or no speech, Morrows or no Morrows. But the question burned, would Kyle rise to meet her, or would his family's legacy pull him away? The chandelier above the private dining room of Lucille, Chicago's premier rooftop restaurant, cast a golden glow over linen-draped tables. Crystal glasses clinked, and the scent of truffle-infused risotto hung in the air. Zuri Adebayo sat poised, her high bun a sculpted emblem of grace, her plum dress catching the light like a quiet challenge. Her valedictorian triumph at the University of Chicago's law graduation hours earlier still thrummed in her veins, but the Morrow family's cold exclusion during the ceremony had left a bruise. Now, at this celebratory dinner, their polished smiles hid sharper blades, and Zuri braced for the next assault. Kyle sat beside her, his hand brushing hers under the table, a gesture meant to reassure but tinged with tension. Across from them, Vivian Morrow sipped her Chardonnay, her cream silk blouse pristine, her eyes appraising Zuri like a curator inspecting a questionable artifact. Gerard, in a charcoal suit, cut into his steak with surgical precision, his silence a wall. Camille, her auburn hair swept over one shoulder, scrolled her phone, her lips curving in a half-smirk. The table was a stage, and Zuri felt every glance dissect her, her skin, her bun, her presence in their world. Vivian broke the quiet, her voice honeyed but edged. Zuri, your speech was quite passionate. Where did you grow up, exactly? Somewhere vibrant, I assume. The word vibrant was a coded jab, implying a rough urban upbringing far from their manicured suburbs. Zuri's fingers tightened around her fork, but her smile held. Evanston, a diverse community, strong on values. My parents worked hard to give me a solid foundation. Her tone was even, her bun gleaming as she met Vivian's gaze, refusing to shrink. Camille looked up, her eyes glinting. Evanston's cute, I guess, but, really? You went from there to Valedictorian? That's unexpected. Her pause before unexpected was deliberate, suggesting Zuri's success was an anomaly, not earned. Zuri's pulse quickened, but she kept her voice steady. Hard work bridges any gap. I built my path step by step. Her words were a quiet defiance, but Camille's smirk lingered, undeterred. Gerard cleared his throat, his fork pausing. Public interest law, right? Noble, but it doesn't pay much, does it? Kyle's got a certain lifestyle to maintain. His tone was casual, but the implication was clear. Zuri's career, her very existence, fell short of their standards. She met his stare, her bun a crown of resolve. I fight for justice, Mr. Morrow. That's worth more than a paycheck. Kyle supports my work. Her eyes flicked to Kyle, a silent plea for backup, but he shifted, his hand squeezing hers without words. Vivian's laugh was soft, cutting. How admirable. But surely it's exhausting, always dealing with such heavy issues. The word heavy dripped with subtext, as if Zuri's focus on marginalized communities was a burden unfit for their table. Zuri's stomach twisted, but she leaned forward, her voice clear. It's rewarding. Every case I take, whether for a tenant facing eviction or a child seeking asylum, changes lives. That's my purpose. Her passion shone, but Vivian's nod was perfunctory, her eyes cold. Camille set her phone down, her tone saccharine. Okay, but isn't it, super intense? I mean, you must see some wild stuff. Not exactly dinner party material. Her words trivialized Zuri's work, painting it as chaotic, alien to their refined world. Zuri's patience frayed, but her composure held, her bun unwavering. I see people fighting for their dignity. That's human, not wild. It's the kind of work that shapes the world. Her eyes locked onto Camille's, and for a moment, the older woman faltered, her smirk fading. Kyle finally spoke, his voice tight. Zuri's changing lives. I'm proud of her. His words were a spark, but they flickered against the chill of his family's scrutiny. Zuri squeezed his hand, grateful but frustrated. She didn't need praise, she needed him to name the venom in their words. The server refilled their glasses, the clink of crystal punctuating the tension. Vivian swirled her wine, her gaze sharpening. Zuri, you mentioned a scholarship. Was that one of those diversity programs? The question was a dagger, implying her admission to law school was a handout, not merit. Zuri's heart pounded, but her face was a mask of calm. I earned my scholarship with top grades and test scores. Northwestern didn't give me anything I didn't deserve. Her voice was steel, her bun a beacon of her unyielding strength. She held Vivian's gaze, daring her to push further. Gerard nodded, but his lips pressed thin. Impressive. They're generous with those, I hear. The word generous was a subtle barb, echoing Camille's earlier lucky break taunt. Zuri's chest tightened, the air thick with their judgment. Camille leaned back, her voice casual but cutting. Must be tough, though, always having to prove yourself. I mean, not everyone sees you as valedictorian material. Her eyes flicked to Zuri's bun, her skin, as if they were evidence of her unworthiness. Zuri's fork clattered softly against her plate, the sound swallowed by the restaurant's hum. She'd faced racism before, overt, systemic, whispered. But this was a new kind of battle. The Maros weren't just questioning her credentials, they were questioning her right to sit here, to love Kyle. Each jab was a test, and Kyle's silence was a wound. She loved his kindness, his dreams, but love demanded more than warmth, it demanded courage. As the server cleared plates, preparing for dessert, Vivian's eyes met Zuri's, sharp and assessing. "You're clearly driven, Zuri. But Kyle's future requires a certain alignment. You understand, don't you?" The words were a velvet glove over a steel fist, implying Zuri's blackness, her roots, could never fit their legacy. Zuri's resolve hardened, her bun a silent vow. She opened her mouth to respond, her mind racing with a retort that would dismantle their arrogance without losing her dignity. But the server's arrival with creme brulee paused the moment, the tension coiling tighter. The dinner was far from over, and Zuri knew the next exchange could break the fragile civility. She was ready to fight not just for Kyle's love, but for her own worth. But as Kyle's hand lingered on hers, his silence louder than his earlier defense, a question burned: would he stand with her when the gloves came off? The private dining room at Lucille shimmered with opulence, its chandelier casting fractured light across untouched creme brulee and half-empty wineglasses. Zuri Adebayo sat like a statue carved from resolve, her high bun gleaming, her plum dress a defiant beacon against the sterile elegance. The Morrow family's barbs, Vivian's probing about her scholarship, Camille's dismissive jabs, Gerard's insinuations had sharpened throughout the dinner. Each one a calculated strike at her right to be here, to love Kyle. Vivian's latest remark, that Kyle's future required alignment Zuri could never provide, hung like a guillotine. The air crackled, the civility of this celebratory dinner fraying at the edges. Kyle's hand rested on Zuri's under the table, his grip tight but trembling. His earlier defense had been a flicker, drowned by his family's relentless scrutiny. Zuri's heart ached for him to do more, to name the prejudice cloaked in their polished words. She was a lawyer, trained to dismantle lies, but this wasn't a courtroom, this was personal, and the stakes were her future. A server approached, his voice cutting through the tension. "Ms. Adebayo, the organizers would like you to say a few words as valedictorian." Zuri nodded, her bun steady as she rose, smoothing her dress. The room, filled with professors, classmates, and local legal luminaries, turned to her, their faces warm with anticipation. Kyle's eyes followed, pride mingling with unease. Vivian's smile was thin, Camille's smirk barely concealed, and Gerard's gaze was a blank ledger. Zuri stepped to the center, her heels clicking on the polished floor. The spotlight found her, her brown skin radiant, her bun a crown of quiet power. "Tonight, we celebrate not just a degree, but a promise," she began, her voice a melody of conviction. "I stand here because of sacrifice, my parents, my own, and because I refuse to let doubt define me. Law is my weapon to fight for those the world overlooks, and I carry that duty with pride." Her words soared, weaving her journey from Evanston's modest streets to this gilded room. The audience leaned in, a professor nodding, a classmate clapping softly. For a moment, Zuri felt invincible, her triumph undeniable. But as she returned to the table, Camille's voice pierced the applause, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Cute speech, but those rags to riches stories? Total cliché. Who buys that?" Vivian's chuckle was sharp, her words aimed at Zuri like an arrow. "She's fiery, I'll grant, but it's a bit theatrical for Kyle's world, don't you think?" The room seemed to shrink, the air sucked out by their public scorn. Zuri's pulse roared, her fingers curling into her palms. She'd just bared her soul, and they'd reduced it to a performance, her blackness a prop in their dismissal. She looked to Kyle, her eyes burning with a silent demand, "Say something." But he froze, his jaw tight, his hand still on hers, but offering no shield. The silence was a betrayal deeper than any of the Morrow's words. Zuri's resolve snapped into place, a steel core forged in years of proving herself. She stood, her movement deliberate, her bun unwavering under the chandelier's glow. The clatter of silverware stilled, every eye on her. "I'd like to add something," she said, her voice low but resonant, commanding the room like a gavel. The server paused, the organizers nodded, and Zuri stepped back to the center, her presence a storm-gathering strength. "Mrs. Morrow, Camille, Mr. Morrow," she began, her gaze sweeping the table, pinning each in turn. "You've questioned my roots, my work, my place here. You call my story a cliché, my passion theatrical. But let's be clear, your judgment isn't about my degree or my speech. It's about my skin, my heritage, and the audacity to love Kyle in your world. Her words were a blade, slicing through their facade with surgical precision. Gasps rippled through the room, but Zuri's voice never wavered. I earned this moment every late night, every victory, every scar from a world that told me I wasn't enough. I'm a lawyer, a daughter, a woman who fights for justice. And I am more than enough for Kyle, for this room, for any legacy you claim to own. Her eyes locked on Vivian's, whose wine glass trembled, her composure cracking. You think my blackness makes me less? That's your failure, not mine. I'm not here to fix your mold. I'm here to break it. The room held its breath, the silence deafening. Camille's smirk vanished, her face pale. Gerard's fork clattered, his eyes darting to his wife. Vivian's lips parted, but no words came, her authority stripped bare. Zuri turned to Kyle, her expression softening but firm. I don't need saving, Kyle, but I need you to stand with me. Choose. Kyle's chair scraped as he stood, his face a storm of guilt and resolve. Enough, he said, his voice shaking but fierce, aimed at his family. Zuri's the most extraordinary woman I know, brilliant, fearless, and my future. You've judged her all night, and I let it happen for too long. If you can't respect her, you're pushing me out of this family. His words were a thunderclap, his hand reaching for Zuri's, a vow in his grip. The dining room seemed to tilt, the chandelier's light stark against the chaos. Vivian's face drained of color, her protest stifled by Kyle's glare. Camille shrank in her seat, her bravado gone. Gerard cleared his throat, but his authority was hollow, overshadowed by Zuri's unyielding presence. The other guests watched, some nodding, others whispering, the weight of Zuri's truth reshaping the room. Zuri stood tall, her bun a silent testament to her strength. She'd thrown down the gauntlet, and Kyle had finally risen to meet her. But the morrow's silence was not surrender, it was a pause, a prelude to their next move. The dinner was a battlefield, and Zuri had claimed this round. But the war wasn't over. As Kyle's hand tightened on hers, she felt a spark of hope, tempered by the certainty that the night's final act was yet to come. The rooftop dining room at Lucille was a battlefield strewn with the wreckage of shattered facades. The chandelier's dimming glow cast jagged shadows over the untouched desserts, the air thick with the aftershock of Zuri Adebio's searing words. Her high bun stood resolute, her plum dress a banner of defiance as she faced the Morrow family's stunned silence. Vivian's wine glass trembled, Camille's bravado had crumbled, and Gerard's authority lay in tatters. Kyle's stand, his fierce declaration to choose Zuri over his family's prejudice, had shifted the ground beneath them all. But the night wasn't over, and Zuri's heart pounded with the certainty that the morrow's defeat was not yet complete. She sat, her posture regal, her bun gleaming like polished obsidian. Kyle's hand clasped hers, his grip a lifeline, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of fear of the rift he'd just carved. The other guests murmured, their whispers a soft current beneath the tension. Zuri's confrontation had been a thunderbolt, exposing the morrow's bias to a room of Chicago's legal elite. She felt their gazes, some admiring, others curious, but her focus remained on the table before her. She'd thrown down her truth, and now the morrows would either retreat or strike back. Vivian recovered first, her voice tight as she set down her glass. Kyle, darling, you're being dramatic. We're simply ensuring your future. Zuri's spirited, but we're just being realistic. The word realistic was a veiled barb, implying Zuri's blackness was a liability. Zuri's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, a new voice cut through the room. Professor Elaine Carver, a titan in constitutional law with silver hair and a commanding presence, approached the table, her eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses, fixed on Zuri. Ms. Adebayo, a moment, she said, her tone warm but authoritative. The room stilled, every head turning. Elaine was a legend, her endorsement a golden ticket in legal circles. Zuri rose, her bun steady, her pulse racing. Elaine's smile was genuine, a stark contrast to Vivian's frost. I've just spoken with the managing partner at Kessler & Lane, she said, loud enough for the table to hear. They've been following your work, your pro bono cases, your valedictorian record. They want you as a senior associate, with a clear path to partner. It's a rare offer for someone your age. The words landed like a grenade. Kessler & Lane was a global law firm, its name synonymous with prestige. Zuri's breath caught, her mind reeling. She'd dreamed of such an opportunity, but to hear it now, in this moment, felt like fate. She nodded, her voice steady despite her shock. Thank you, Professor. I'm honored. Elaine's gaze flicked to the Morrows, her expression cool. You've got a star here. I'd hoped her partner's family would see that. The rebuke was subtle but unmistakable, and Vivian's face paled, her lips parting in protest, but finding no words. Camille's phone slipped from her hand, clattering onto the table. Gerard's fork froze midair, his eyes darting between Zuri and Elaine. Kyle's face broke into a grin, pride replacing his earlier fear. Zuri, that's incredible, he said, his voice thick with emotion. He squeezed her hand, his earlier hesitation gone, replaced by a fierce resolve. The room buzzed, guests whispering about Kessler and Lane's offer. Zuri stood taller, her bun a crown of triumph. The Morrows had dismissed her as a lucky scholarship girl, but this revelation stripped their judgment bare. She wasn't just Kyle's girlfriend or a public interest lawyer, she was a force, courted by giants. Vivian's voice trembled as she tried to regain control. Well, that's impressive, Zuri. We didn't realize you had such prospects. Her words were a concession, but they lacked warmth, a desperate bid to save face. Zuri met her gaze, her voice calm but edged with steel. You didn't ask, Mrs. Morrow. You assumed I didn't belong. Her words were a mirror, reflecting the Morrow's prejudice back at them. Camille looked away, her fingers twisting her napkin. Gerard cleared his throat, his authority diminished. Kyle stood, his chair scraping softly. Mom, Dad, Camille, he said, his voice steady now, I meant what I said. Zuri's my future. If you can't respect her, her brilliance, her worth, then we're done here. No more dinners, no more holidays. His ultimatum was a wall, unyielding, and Zuri's heart warmed. He wasn't just defending her now, he was choosing her fully. Vivian's eyes widened, her composure fracturing. Kyle, you can't mean that, she stammered. But his silence was answer enough. Gerard shifted, his voice gruff. Let's not escalate. We'll discuss this later. It was a retreat, not an apology, but it was more than Zuri had expected. Camille, her face flushed, spoke softly. Zuri, I was wrong. You're amazing. I'm sorry. Her words were raw, a crack in the Morrow's armor. Zuri studied her, her bun unwavering. Thank you, Camille. Words are a start, but actions matter more. Her tone was measured, offering a bridge but demanding accountability. Elaine nodded approvingly before returning to her table, leaving the Morrows exposed. The dinner resumed, but the atmosphere had shifted. Guests approached Zuri, offering congratulations on her offer, their warmth a stark contrast to the Morrows' chill. Zuri smiled, her bun a silent vow of resilience, but her mind was already on the future. Kessler and Lane was a door to new battles, and Kyle's stand was a foundation to build on. As the evening wound down, Kyle leaned close, his voice a whisper. I'm all in, Zuri. I'll prove it every day. His eyes held a promise, and for the first time that night, Zuri believed him. She squeezed his hand, her heart steadying. The Morrow's prejudice hadn't vanished, but their power over her had. She was Zuri Adebayo, lawyer, warrior, and no one could dim her light. The chandelier flickered, its glow softening as guests began to leave. Zuri stood, her bun pristine, ready to step into the night. The Morrows watched, their silence a concession, their legacy shaken. This was her victory, but the road ahead would test her and Kyle further. She was ready, her strength a flame that no shadow could extinguish. The Chicago River glittered under the city's neon pulse, its surface a canvas of reflected dreams. Zuri Adebayo stood by the water's edge, her tailored blazer sharp against the evening breeze, her jeans a nod to the dreamer beneath her lawyer's armor. Her high bun, still pristine, caught the glow of streetlights, a testament to the strength that had carried her through the crucible of her law school graduation a month ago. The dinner at Lucille, where the Morrow family's prejudice had clashed with her unyielding resolve and Kyle's belated stand, felt like a distant storm. Now, as the city hummed around her, Zuri was forging a future on her own terms, her heart alight with possibility. Kyle stood beside her, his hand warm in hers, his dark hair ruffling in the wind. His gray sweater was a quiet contrast to the intensity in his eyes, a vow that hadn't wavered since he'd drawn a line against his family's bias. The Kessler and Lane offer, announced by Professor Carver that night, had been a seismic shift, proving Zuri's worth to a room that included the humbled Morrows. She'd accepted the senior associate role, her days now filled with high-stakes cases and her nights with Kyle's laughter. But the scars of that dinner lingered, a reminder that love and legacy were battles won through action, not promises. Zuri's phone buzzed, a message from her mother, "Proud of you always. Keep shining." She smiled, her bun steady as she tucked the phone away. Her parents had watched her graduation speech online, their tears a balm for the Morrow's disdain. They'd raised her to stand tall, and she carried their faith like a shield. Kyle squeezed her hand, sensing her thoughts. "You okay?" he asked, his voice soft but anchored. She nodded, her eyes tracing the river's flow. "Better than okay. I'm building something real, Kyle, with you, with my work." Her voice held a quiet fire, tempered by the trials they'd faced. The Morrows hadn't vanished. Vivian's silence was a fortress, Gerard's efforts clumsy, Camille's remorse tentative, but Zuri no longer needed their approval. Her worth was her own, forged in fire. Kyle's jaw tightened, a flicker of guilt in his gaze. "I should have stood up sooner that night. I'm still unlearning their world, Zuri. But I'm all in." He'd proven it since, skipping a Morrow family gala when Vivian refused to acknowledge Zuri's role in his life. He'd enrolled in a racial equity workshop, his questions earnest, his listening deep. Each step was a brick in their shared foundation. And Zuri cherished his growth, though she knew it was a journey, not a destination. Their walk led to a small jazz club, its neon sign buzzing. Inside, the air was thick with saxophone notes and the clink of glasses. Zuri and Kyle settled at a corner table, their friends lawyers, coders, artists, joining them. The group was a tapestry of color and ambition, a stark contrast to the Morrow's sterile elegance. Laughter erupted as Zuri recounted a recent case, her bun glinting as she leaned forward, her voice alive with passion. Kyle watched her, his pride a quiet flame. This was their world, built on mutual respect, not legacy. A text from Camille interrupted the moment. "Can we talk soon? I'm trying to understand." Zuri paused, her fingers hovering over the screen. Camille had attended one of Zuri's public talks at a legal forum, her notebook filled with questions. Their coffee meeting afterward had been awkward but honest, Camille admitting, "I grew up blind to my privilege. You opened my eyes." Zuri had offered grace, but trust would come slowly. She replied, "Next week. Bring questions." Camille's effort was a seed, fragile but real. Gerard, too, had surprised her. He'd sent a formal email requesting a meeting to discuss her work on housing equity. Their lunch was stilted, his questions halting, but he'd read about redlining, his curiosity a crack in his stoic facade. "I misjudged you," he'd said, not quite an apology, but a start. Zuri had responded with measured openness, sharing case studies, planting seeds for change. Vivian, however, remained a shadow. Her curt note after the dinner claimed misunderstanding but offered no remorse. Zuri didn't care, her light didn't need Vivian's validation. At the club, Kyle raised a glass, his voice cutting through the music, to Zuri, who's unstoppable. The table cheered, and Zuri's laugh was a melody, her bun a crown of triumph. She'd stood on a Kessler and Lane stage last week, presenting a case that secured funding for a community center, her presence commanding a boardroom of suits. Kyle had been there, his applause thunderous, his eyes shining with awe. Their love was stronger now, forged in the crucible of that night, each challenge a chance to grow. As the band played a slow tune, Kyle pulled Zuri to the dance floor, his arms a sanctuary. "We're building this together," he whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "No one, not my family, not the world, will stop us." Zuri nodded, her heart full. She didn't need him to complete her, she was whole. But his choice to fight beside her was a gift. The city pulsed beyond the club's windows, a reminder of battles yet to come. Vivian's resistance was a stubborn weed, Gerard's progress slow, Camille's growth young. Prejudice didn't vanish with one confrontation. But Zuri was patient, her strength infinite. She and Kyle hosted game nights, planned trips to cities steeped in history, their love a canvas of shared dreams. Her work at Kessler and Lane was a beacon, each case a step toward justice. Zuri stepped back, her bun catching the club's dim light. The river outside flowed on, steady and unyielding, like her resolve. She was Zuri Adebayo, lawyer, lover, warrior, and her story was still unfolding. The Morrows had underestimated her, but their legacy couldn't dim her radiance. As Kyle's hand found hers, warm and sure, Zuri knew this was her chapter, one of triumph and possibility, with countless pages left to write. Thank you for joining Zuri Adebayo's unforgettable journey of resilience and triumph with Real Stories Diary. Her courage reminds us that love and worth are battles worth fighting. What moved you most about her story? How did it challenge or inspire you? Drop your thoughts in the comments and share where you're listening from: Paris, Chicago, or beyond. Your support fuels these tales. So, please like, subscribe, and spread the word for Real Stories Diary. Until next time, keep shining, keep fighting, and we'll meet again with another story that stirs the soul. Stay bold, just like Zuri.